Soybeans going down and the other commodities following after the USDA report. Jerry Gidel is going to comment from Chicago, Illinois, right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, how are you today? What happened with this major drop?
Well, this week's USDA report, I wouldn't consider it negative. It just wasn't as friendly as people thought it could be, or at least that regard. But the key thing is that a combination of things here after the report kind of added to the setback of things. We've been going back and forth about how much rain was going to hit in North Dakota, and that over this week, the two major models, the American and the European, were back and forth on that. Actually, the American one this week, surprisingly, that there was more rain than the North Dakota side of the border up there. But the twist of it is that the rain event that was going to the Dakotas actually slipped further southward here. Moved into eastern Nebraska, down into past Omaha towards Kansas City, which was a surprise, and that it made that further of most of the trajectory of those storms have kind of went across Minnesota and northern Wisconsin, not got anywhere close to the Midwest from there. So that added a nice strain to today's market. And then, of course, there was a report out from one of the wire services today that the Biden administration was in discussions with some smaller refining operations in the East. One of them actually in his home state of Delaware, about some ideas about the whole renewable fuel situation. The biggest thing in this whole thing is we've got a very terrible REN system. It's renewable identification number. It's a terrible system that should never have been started. The industry is rigging itself up to make more money out of it, the people that have RENs and the people that need RENs, and the previous administration was giving all kinds of passes on that. I don't think the key thing is I'd love to see that system completely abandoned, and just the requirement that we're going to have 10% renewables in gasolines around the country, and considering right now the price of ethanol still is cheaper to blend into gasoline than to have straight gasoline. So, but the energy world has been against this concept ever since it began 2007, and so right at this point we've got a lot of confusion. I think that I'd love to just say that the tank farms just have it there and blend it out, and they put in the record saying that this is here, and there's nobody in the refining and oil industry has to buy some kind of ticket to say that they have created ethanol for their gasoline. So, but that is one of the issues this week, looking back at the supply demand report we had yesterday.
Yeah, so the report didn't bring a lot of changes.
No, it didn't. Actually, the one change that happened, somewhat side or bigger situation, was the corn side. We've mentioned before, I think everybody in the industry was really kind of anticipating the fact that with the opening of the U.S. here, because of our vaccination rates getting closer and closer to 70%, and that on a nationwide basis, that the U.S. population would love to get in a car and go somewhere. So there's been real optimism about expanded demand for gasoline and, of course, expanded ethanol. We've seen some buildings of the weekly numbers here from the ethanol industry, and then that type of thing. And so the idea that they could potentially increase that number, I was looking for 50 million bushels. The trade maybe about that number or so, and then came in 75 million. I think the one twist that for me and for other people is that the USDA went ahead and also increased our exports by 75 million. So that was 150 million decrease in our old crop carryover old crop stocks. And so in that case, that was a little bit friendly. Actually, the market was up about 15 to 18 cents yesterday. It just didn't get to as high as the market was looking for. And the one thing that really kind of held it back was the soybean number that came through yesterday. That particular number, the idea of maybe slipping back on the crush statistics because of kind of performances the last couple months here, and also the kind of reemergence of Argentina here with their crushing industry. I think I saw a statistic today is all the way back up to 72% capacity, and that's after the difficulties they've had and the problems of the biggest crusher down there. That's definitely a positive, and they're going to be a competitive in the world, and they always are. But on the meal side, the meal has been kind of interestingly sluggish, but the soybean oil has really been carrying the load on the U.S. soybean crush. But okay, it's either 10 or 15 million lower. Not a big deal, because I anticipated, and I think some other people did too, is that the crush U.S. exports would then turn around and kind of absorb that extra or that demand that wasn't used on the domestic side, and we'd stay pretty close to the current 120 old crop carryover stock. Well, the USDA, I guess they took some solace from the fact that they found 1 million metric tons bigger crop in Brazil, and they went that from 136 to 137. And so, okay, we've got additional basically 36, 37 million bushels here. They will definitely export it, and I don't disagree in that. But I think that the interesting twist is going to end up being that 135 million carryover stock, by the way, is not a huge difference versus 120. And the same situation is that we're coming up towards the end of the month here. We're going to have an update on our U.S. plantings and how many beans we have left in our stocks after 3/4 of the year. And I think that's maybe the other feature that's kind of floating around here, that they decided to wait to see what those numbers gave us for the soybeans from there. So those are the two, the big market factors there on the and the beans actually just kind of kept slip sliding away. And then today, with those two combinations of surprise weather, rain activity, and they moved down through the eastern parts of Nebraska and a few places in western Iowa, which definitely could appreciate this little rain. It's going to be a half to maybe an inch in some cases. There's a few threatening weather possibilities out there. But basically, there's not much in the forecast now until there's some chances here on the same system yet tonight, but in the northern Illinois. But we need to be substantially behind normal here. I think I saw a statistic last night that we were 9 inches behind in the city of Chicago versus normal for the whole year, and that was like 6.5 to 7, and so we're normally 16 or 17, and we only got 7. So that's definitely, I'm still watering my lawn here in Chicago.
Yeah, and do you think that the major corn importers will be able to do something that would put the corn price down?
Well, that's an interesting feature there as to, will they decide that they can be patient enough to wait for this price to sink down further here of some substantialness. I think the real twist of that will be as to what our weather continues to be here in the western parts of the U.S. past the Mississippi River. I know the shower activity here that I mentioned come overnight here, but with limited rains. And the other thing I'm hearing about is that the humidity factor is going to drop back again. So even if we're not 95 here in North and South Dakota, the humidity factor might drop from 70% down, or high values all the way back down to low. And so even if we go back to 80, it's going to still have a net drying effect. So that's a twist on there. The corn I think is really on a knife's edge right now as to what prices can do on this thing. I know that this is not the time of year where the crop can get really hurt by the warm weather like it can in July and August, because the interesting thing about it, it's still in the smaller stages. It still doesn't require as much daily moisture on a daily basis. But the interesting twist on it is someone brought this statistic up that right now the stage of the topsoil and subsoil in the western half that I keep talking about of the Corn Belt, and that is lower than it was in 2012. That's a significant number to think about from there. I know to some extent the 2012 drought done a build out of the southeast. It was a Bermuda high, and some of the first indications of problems came up in the Kentucky, Southern Illinois, Southern Indiana areas, and that where the crop gave up the ghost early that year. But at the same situation, it's going to be highly important that we change our direction on what's going on here. And there hasn't been any significant change. Now, I guess the old classic was today the first salvo of a change. I guess that's something to consider, but I'd also have to say that the market is going to still respect these upcoming reports, particularly on the corn side. It's really the stocks report as to what that might say. I think there still seems to be an attitude that we're going to find more corn acres of some significance, and that the bean side of the thing, I think the acreage number is the one that gives me willies. If we're going to have this big jump in U.S. corn plantings, and I'm really in a 1.5. I'd have a hard time getting 2 million more acres than the 91 million we've got from the USDA, and the same side, I kind of feel like the best we might be able to do is maybe 1 million on soybeans, and 1 million on soybeans is going to be making that number quite interesting here going into the 21-22 crop year.
So we'll keep checking the weather next week.
Definitely. One thing I want to pop up in here on the corn, which is also kind of goes back to that statistic we about things on the weather. This week's number of 1.1 billion. Okay, that's not under 1 billion. It's not a big feature out there we've had numbers as like 1995 we're at 500, but we're a hugely different amount of demand and commercial activities these days. And how you measure that is the stocks to use ratio, which is the relationship of the total demand that's quoted against how many bushels you still have in the end of the year. And that relationship, surprisingly, with this week's drop, we actually slipped down to a number of 7.37%. Well, that's pretty significant. Actually, it's to me, it's quite significant because in 2012, the last time we had some very historic prices here, that ratio was 7.41%. So in reality, the current projection of stocks to use an old crop is smaller than it was in 2012. Now, we're not at the same crucial level of the crop year. We've got lots of growing time to go. But if there's situations here where some of those overseas buyers gets nervous, and let's make sure our friends in Beijing are part of that crowd. They decide that they'd rather own it in their pocket and not ours. That can make a significant factor in this corn market. We are, as I said earlier, on a knife's edge, and we'll see how that works out. But this market is really could be an interesting one here. The whole U.S. summer. We've got the short term between now and June 30th, but also we're not done with the impact of things if this weather doesn't completely change, and that's always something that can happen.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much, Jerry Gidel.
Have a good day, Louis. We'll see what develops next week.